Hello and welcome to preview season for Murders at Karlov Manor. I am here with my good pal Hazor,
And
and I am Grimside.
yep, we're here to give you our top 12 plus honorable mention cards from Murders of Karlov Manor. It's pretty important to note that because of the new whole play booster change in all of Magic, the cards from the special guest list and the list in general are also coming to Arena, and so you will see a couple appearances of those on our list of the top 12 plus honorable mention cards.
Now, don't think that this is us saying that there's not a lot of good cards in this set. No, far from it. It actually was very hard to narrow down cards in general with this.
Yeah.
Uh, Speaking of, how about we talk about one of the honorable mentions?
Yes, our honorable mention for this set is Gamble. Gamble, if you don't know, it's one red mana. It's a sorcery. It lets you search your library for any card, put it into your hand, and then discard a card at random. Then shuffle your library. In general, Gamble is just a very good card. One mana tutor, but you have to make sure you aren't discarding the card that you draw from it.
Honestly, even if you discard the card, sometimes it's not that bad because it thins out the deck in general. Some people hope to gamble and to actually discard the card because they want it in their graveyard.
Yeah.
Uh, as a whole, I just think that with the way these cards go, it's just one of the few that we have to just mention.
Yeah, it's we mentioned it because it's a strong card. The reason it's not on the top 12 is that neither of us can really personally think of any historic brawl decks where this card is a sure slot in, because, at least for me, a lot of combo decks don't want to discard the thing they're comboing for, and most of the cards that can utilize whatever you discard uh, aren't playing red, and if you're a red aggro deck, Gamble is just really not worth it.
Exactly.
Yep.
But here we are moving to what is worth it in number 12, the hard hitting question. For one green mana, sorcery speed, you get a spell that goes. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. Now, this is honestly going to be seen in a lot of aggressive decks. Fin Death Touch decks, just Gruel aggro in general. Heck, I could see it used in Sovereign Oginek, which is honestly a fantastic card in general. I think what makes it key is two things. It's able to target creatures and planeswalkers, and it's things you don't control. So if someone were to redirect spell, I guess there's not really many of those in this format, but
Not
if
really.
they ever introduce some, they can't really make it so that you have to fight your own creature.
Yeah, really, the most important part of this is that it's one mana. I think it's the first one mana version of the spell where it's not a fight, it's a bite. So the other creature isn't going to kill your creature when you do it. It's really, I believe it's probably just the best green removal spell of this category that's ever been printed. That being said, it's at number 12 because the green removal spells are terrible, and so the best green
Well,
removal spell isn't saying much.
well, to be fair, the best green removal is just a creature to beat your face down.
That's
So,
true. Player removal is the best removal, as they say.
moving on.
Yep. Next, we have the next edition in black board wipes. We have Deadly Cover Up. It's 3 black black for a sorcery, with as an additional cost to cast the spell, you may collect evidence 6. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe collect evidence 6 means you can exile cards with a total mana value of 6 or greater from your graveyard. I think that's right.
Correct.
Uh,
You can.
Destroy all creatures is the first thing the card does. That's the main point. If evidence was collected, exile a card from an opponent's graveyard. Then you get to search that player's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with that same name and exile them. That player shuffles, then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand in this way. Really just here because it's another black board wipe, and black doesn't have a lot of unconditional board wipes, so any Dimir control decks will easily play this. Also potential upside for getting hand information on your opponent. Generally a good card.
In my opinion, it also is a situational card in general. Obviously, in Historic Brawl, you're not probably never going to be really using to collect evidence. It's just seen as a board wipe. But in general, there are certain cards that are coming out, including Slime Against Humanity, which a person can run any number of. and this can just basically wipe out all their copies from the deck. It's simple, it's synergistic in that type of situation. Heck, you could, and the fact that it says not doesn't say it can't hit a basic land means you could thin out a person's deck
Can
of
it
all
play
the
hit a
lanes for
basic
the
land? It
play.
can.
Yeah,
Yes, it can hit basic
surprising.
lands. It's actually very irrelevant. Yeah, you can exile your opponent's basic lands in their mono whatever color deck with this. So,
So
think of
Stone
that
Rain,
upside.
Stone Rain destroy their planes, blow up the board, get
Yep.
target planes, boom, gone.
Yeah, this is mostly played in black control decks, but yeah, that collect evidence ability has upsides against the people that are running any of those meme decks with the any number of copies. Can exile lands, as has been said, and just in general, hand information can be a valuable thing if you can spare graveyard cards.
Moving on, we're gonna go with our first list card, Smuggler's Copter. For 2 mana, you get a vehicle artifact that has flying. Whenever it becomes attacks or blocks, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. And crew 1 with the power and toughness of 3/3. Now, in general, Smuggler's Copter, I feel like I don't have to introduce as much to people who played it in standard. It was a powerhouse, got really banned very early on, just because aggressively or defensively, it can still do the loot. So if your opponent's attacking, you can block with it, kill the creature, just loot type situation. You can just go be aggressive for three with a 3/3 flyer as early as turn 2. And yeah, overall, it's a good card.
Yeah, this honestly should probably be higher on the list. Main reason it's so far down is that I didn't play with this card in standard, so I probably don't know the full capabilities of it. Looking at it right now, just a 3 mana, not 3 mana, 2 mana, 2 mana 3/3 that can crew with your creatures that just enter the battlefield. So if you do one drop this on 2 and then add a line or something, you can crew this with your add a line and attack with it and get your loot and your 1/1 and everything else that you might want. So it's just really an above rate body that also loots you. It's a very strong card. Yeah.
Hey, let's move on.
Yeah, moving on. We have the first case enchantment. Uh, just a little background on the case enchantments. They're kind of like sagas, in which when you play them, you'll have a first chapter, which is actually just a permanent ability. They have a solved condition in the middle, where at the beginning of your end step, if you meet the condition, the case becomes solved. And then if it is solved, you get some extra ability. So, Case of the Locked House is 3 and a green for an enchantment with you may play an additional land on each of your turns. As long as it's unsolved, you can play an additional land. To solve it, you must control 7 or more lands. So if you control 7 or more lands on your end step, the case will become solved. When it is solved, it gains the ability. You may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you may play lands and cast creature or enchantment spells from the top of your library. So you can play half. If you're playing a lands deck, you can play all your lands and all your creatures in the top of your library. If you're getting to the 7 land condition reliably, it's better than Oracle of Muldiah, and this will just see play in a lot of lands decks and green decks.
I also think that because it's an enchantment style thing, and it states with the you can play enchantments on the top of your library. Decks like Sithis, Calyx would love to use this card in general. Because of the matter is that sometimes you're going to have a top deck that you really want to play, but you can't. But well, now with this, you not only do you see that thing, you can play it, and but you can also now get even more value through the ramping early on.
Yep. In addition with Sithis, actually, you're usually going to end up with a lot of lands in your hand if your Sithis engine is going off, and this will help you get rid of them also. But even in just lands decks like Azusa loves all these play lands off the top type of things, and this one will fit in perfectly with the rest of them, in addition to letting you cast all your creature spells. Also, because it's an enchantment itself, it's harder to remove than all the creatures with the lands from top of the library effects. So it's a lot harder for your opponent to remove this card advantage as well, which is why it's a strong card.
Ah, moving on, we're gonna be going with No More Lies. For a blue and a white, you get an instant counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. If that spell's countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's library.
Good
This is
card.
just a 2 mana counter spell style thing type situation. It's a classic use overall. The upside is so much better than a lot of these types of cards. Uh, I'd argue that it would be a debate with this and Dovin's Veto. Dovin's Veto could slightly beat it in general because it's an unconditional counter, but as a whole, No More Lies is just better situational wise since it can hit creatures.
Yep. Yeah, No More Lies, just it's an addition to Blue-White Control's counter spell suite. We don't actually have a Mana Leak being a 2-mana counter spell that counters as this controller plays 3 variant on Arena yet. This is our first, and things like Make Disappear were already format staples, so just having the Mana Leak would already see play, and this one is a Mana Leak with upside for your Azorius decks, so it's probably just an instant staple in all Azorius decks that you play.
Indeed.
Yes, pretty simple. Moving on, we have a fun card. This one is Anzrog the Quake Mole. It's 2 red and a green for an 8/4 legendary creature Mole God. That's right, 8/4 for 4 mana. Whenever Anzrog the Quake Mole becomes blocked, untap each creature you control. After this combat phase, there is an additional combat phase. You can also pay 3 red red green green to make it must be blocked this combat each combat this turn if able. It's really just the premier Gruul card. You can't really get more Gruul than an 8/4 for 4 mana that gives you extra combats. It's really just that it's a really above rate body that either your opponent is taking 8 damage from or they're letting you get extra combats from.
As a whole, I just think Ansrog is actually going to be one of the see not only just see play, but be incredibly busted in this format. In general, aggro decks usually do want to hit fast and hard, and Ansrog basically gives you extra combat or makes it so that you have to uh, let it through. And 8 damage is almost three hits of death.
Yep.
So in general, I think that not only will Onzrok see play, I'm probably going to be brewing a copy myself.
Yeah, I think if you're playing any kind of even slightly aggressive Gruul deck, this will slot right in. Any Domri decks, any Xenaghost decks, I guess. This
Yeah,
just goes in
yeah.
there. Its damage potential is off the charts, and even if they do block and kill it, you're still getting those extra combats for the rest of your creatures to get through a second time. It's a strong card in general.
Very strong. Moving on, we got Drag the Canal for blue and a black instant. We create a 2/2 white and blue detect the creature token. If a creature died this turn, you gain 2 life, surveil 2, then investigate. So yeah, this is really good. This is honestly, you just as a third turn thing, you like do something like a fatal push on a creature that dies. You get a detective, a clue, and you get to look at the top 2 cards of your library to see if you like them or not. But in general, I think that the real key thing is that it makes a 2/2 at instant speed. So even if you can't use its mode with the destroy, you can still get something like a blocker to just kill something else already, which in my opinion really ups it up, makes it more playable than other styles of cards like this.
Yeah. At its floor, it's an instant speed 2/2, which is not really a good rate in general, but it can be a surprise blocker if you really need it. But in any kind of Dimir style controlling deck, which is what you would play this in, it's really any Dimir or maybe even Esper control deck, you playing a removal spell, and then you're playing this on a later phase of the turn, potentially to block something. You get your 2/2 body, which can be a relevant beater for control, and you also get a little bit of life gain, which can be relevant against aggro. You get to look at your next draws, and you can investigate and draw an extra card later. It just really does everything for 2 mana.
It's a catch-all card, and sometimes that's all you need.
Certainly, yeah, it's good. The next card we have is another case. This one is Case of the Stashed Skeleton. It's 1 and a black for a case, an enchantment case. Which, when this case enters the battlefield, create a 2/1 black skeleton creature token and suspect it. To solve it, you must control no suspected skeletons. And when it is solved, you can pay 1 and a black to sacrifice this case, to search your library for a card and put it into your hand, then shuffle. Activate only as a sorcery. Suspect also, I didn't mention that. A suspected creature has menace and can't block. Any thoughts?
Honestly, besides it being a skeleton in the closet, I think it's a fantastic card in general because they either have to take the hits for the skeletons, so it's basically a guaranteed hit, or they just leave you with a 2-drop spell that can grab anything from your deck in general. I think as a whole, it's a bit slow compared to other tutors like Demonic Tutor, Diabolic, stuff like that. But in its upsides way with the body, can somewhat help with solving those situations overall. And in general, there are cards that come out that can remove suspect from creatures. So you could just keep the body, get the and still get the case.
Yeah. I'm the main place I get this. I see this having play is in sacrifice decks because you can play this case, get your body, possibly hit with it, possibly just in Yawgmoth or something, immediately cash that skeleton in for a -1/-1 counter and a card draw, and then on your end step you'll solve it, and then on your next turn you just have a demonic tutor, and we know demonic tutor is a very strong card, and this is just another version of it, essentially if you're playing a sacrifice deck.
Very situational, but very impactful. So,
Certainly.
moving on, we got our next card. Analyze the pollen. Now, as an additional cost to cast this spell, you may collect evidence 8. Exile card, the total mana value is greater. And you search your library for a basic card. If evidence is collected, instead search your library for a creature or land card. Field that card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Now, most people would think of this as one of those one-drop spells, like I think it's like a bushwhack type uh thing where you either search your library for a land bit or you have another spell thing. But in general, this thing card is like basically a 1 mana get Crater Hoof Behemoth, get Ulamog, get Emrakul. The argument is I like to see it as a reverse stealth, where you have a cheap spell that you can make more expensive to get the better
It's
payoffs.
kicker. It's all
Essentially,
kicker.
kick out from the grave. Everything is kicker.
Yes, it's all kicker. Yeah, this card is good if you know traverse the Ulvenwald, something like that, which is basically a different copy of this card with Delirium. Um, this card will just let you, if you filled your graveyard, preferably in some kind of Golgari plus color combination, but even in certain green or Simic decks that want a tutor, this will, as long as you've put 8 mana value spells in your graveyard, search for any creature or land card from your deck and put it into your hand for the mere price of 1 mana. Um, really, the only reason this isn't higher is that Collect Evidence 8 can be a really steep cost to get to early. If you're in some kind of milling type deck, you'll get there pretty fast. If you're in, I know some jankier builds of Jadzi or Oracle of Arcavios. Actually, that deck is just janky in general. But like that deck, any deck that wants a specific creature and can fill their graveyard fast, uh, will just take this card immediately. It's better. I think it's better than Traverse the Open Wall, honestly.
It certainly is. I hope to see this play not only in Historic Brawl, but also in formats like Pioneer and stuff.
Yeah, it will definitely see play. It's a strong card. All right. Next, we have a personal favorite of mine from the set. I'm not even a green player, but we have Archdruid's Charm. It's green, green, green for an instant with choose one. The first mode is search your library for a creature or land card and reveal it. Any land card, by the way. Put it onto the battlefield tapped if it's a land card. Otherwise, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Second, put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control that deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Or third, exile target artifact or enchantment. I really love this card because it does everything a green deck wants for 3 mana. You get your 3 mana instant ramp for any land in your deck. You can get your Nykthos, you can get your, I don't know what deck uses Lotus Field, but Lotus Field, you can get your Castle Garenbrig, you can get any number of great utility lands with this card onto the battlefield at instant speed. You can get your Emrakul or your Crater Hoof for 3 mana, or you can remove something if you really need to.
I think that as a whole, its cost is very steep, but its payoff is 100% worth it in general type situation. So you're probably not going to see this in a 3-color or and definitely not a 4-color deck.
Nope.
But a 2 to 1 color strategies of green will absolutely want to try to at least attempt to use it. Just in general, a 3 mana XL artifact enchantments is good enough on its own at instant speed. But then you just also get a fight spell, as well as you could probably get a land to get like Nykthos, or you can even get things like some graveyard reanimating decks like Gitrog monsters could use get Lotus Field, get two. Now you got your Gitrog monster. Bam! You're
Yeah.
getting your entire synergy there.
Yeah. Yeah. This card really does everything a green deck would want, and yeah, as Grimsand said, the only thing holding it back is that triple green mana cost. I don't think there's a mono green deck I can think of off the top of my head that wouldn't want to play this, and a lot of two-color ramp decks would want to play this also.
Indeed. All right, moving on to another card Dex would like to play Ghostly Prison. For 2 and a white, you get an enchantment that says creatures can attack you unless the controller pays 2 for each creature they control that's attacking you. Now, as a whole, Ghostly Prison is pretty infamous as a whole. There used to be in modern Enchantress decks that would use these effects to basically prevent your opponent from attacking while you build up your synergy. Uh, in Historic Brawl, Sithis would absolutely use this card. And while you gotta take note that they can still attack your planeswalkers without having to pay the tax, that is very irrelevant if you don't run any planeswalkers to be able to be attacked at.
Yeah, this card will single-handedly boost white control a lot. Like even your Orzhov control decks or your Boros control decks, this card will absolutely shut down aggro curves that your opponents have because either they're not casting spells or they're not attacking you, and either way, that's really good upside that you can have. It's just an all-around strong enchantment that really will go in almost any slow white deck.
Absolutely think so too.
Yep. All right. The number one card. It's not a mythic. It's not even a rare. It's an uncommon. It's Case of the Gateway Express. 1 and a white for a case as an enchantment. With when this case enters the battlefield, choose target creature you don't control. Each creature you control deals 1 damage to that creature. To solve it, you must have attacked with 3 or more creatures this turn. And when it is solved, creatures you control get +1/+0. Uh, it's a solid removal spell in the first mode. That's the biggest upside, is that for 2 mana, and it's for any white aggro deck, and white aggro decks do exist plentifully in this format. For any white aggro deck that will go wide, this is a very good removal spell, particularly early game. And then once you've met the condition, which is also trivial in a white aggro deck, you get a permanent anthem on every creature in your massive board state. It's just very strong.
Honestly, as I've been saying, this is a case of like a reverse enchantment effect thing, where instead of getting an enchantment that could have situational removal, this is situational removal that can become a load effect in general. Like, it's actually a lot of people will think this card is pretty hard to activate, but 3 creatures with haste in general could probably do it type situation. You can just do turn 1 creature, turn 2 soldier with make a token, turn 3 this, and then bam, you already have the Lord effect there at 2 mana.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that the real key thing that makes this work so well is that it makes the creatures deal the damage. So if a creature has lifelink or death touch, those
Oh,
triggers will happen.
that is true. Yeah. Yeah, that is all true. I was going to say something. That's right. Yes. Legion's Landing is a card that sees play in every white aggro deck in the format, and that card's main condition is that you attack with 3 or more creatures. And before you achieve that condition, it's a very below rate card. This card has the same condition, but it's actually pretty. Not even. It's not even far below rate if it even is below rate for the first part of the card. So you get really good upside for a condition that's not very hard to achieve.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I think
the,
I
the,
think as a whole, the card is not only going to see a good play in aggressive decks, but in some cases where you're gonna have it in general, where you just in going wide, you would want to use it. But then you can have something like with Death Touch, like what I guess Fins, though I guess you can't use it to Fin, but cards like those would just make it so that your 1 drop creature can take out an Adeline, or take out just, well, any problem card. I mean, Pakal, killing one of those with ease is just fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, this will go in every white aggro deck, probably every tokens deck. It just goes in so many places and will do so much work in those decks.
So
And
that
that's why
is
it's our number one.
indeed. So that is Murders of Karlov Manor.
Yep.
Fantastic set. That was really hard to narrow down our top 12s.
Yeah,
Early on,
and
early on during previous seasons, we thought it was actually going to be super easy list type situation.
yeah, I mean, the set in general, it is a low power set, and that besides our top 12 here, there's maybe 4 or 5 more cards, which I would even consider playing in this format. The average power level of a card in the set is just not high at all. But these 12 cards that we have compiled here, well, 13, are all very strong cards that you should definitely add to your decks.
With that, we hope you have a wonderful night.
Yeah, thanks for watching.
See you all next season.
Yep.